Abadesi, founder and CEO at Hustle Crew, and in this video, I'm going to share some strategies for discussing bias at work. Now, whether you're reading Lean In's research or McKinsey's Women in the Workplace report that's published every year, you've probably seen a lot of the data points that shows how bias is everywhere. The scary thing about bias is it impacts a lot of the important decisions we make at work, like who we should hire, who we should promote, who we should give a pay rise to, who we should pick to lead this project. One of the most compelling quotes I've ever read about bias is, "Wherever there is bias in a decision-making process, ambiguity wins." And that's pretty scary if you think about it. Most of us are going through our roles, our day-to-days, trying to make objective, data-driven decisions. But the evidence shows that we rarely make objective decisions by virtue of how we've been designed, biologically, anatomically, by virtue of how our brains work. We rely on mental shortcuts to get through the day. An article on Inc.com said that the average adult has already made tens of thousands of decisions before they get to lunch, lots of micro decisions: which side of the bed should I get out of, which foot should go down first, do I wet my toothbrush before or after the toothpaste, what should I have for breakfast? Because we're overwhelmed with decisions in an already busy or chaotic world, we tend to rely on mental shortcuts. Now, it might have been effective for our ancestors, but less effective for us now as we try to create diverse and inclusive work environments. So now that we've established the fact that bias is prevalent, it exists, it's not going anywhere, we then need to have a conversation about how we manage it, especially if we're trying to create policies within our team that really promote equity, belonging, and justice. So the first step is making sure that everyone in your team has accepted what the research says about the prevalence of bias. If some of the people on your team are still doubting whether or not bias exists, or genuinely believe that their brains can operate like a computer and make decisions that have no personal preferences or values or opinions shaping them, it's going to be really hard for you to reduce the impact of bias in your day-to-day. So whether you are sharing articles, creating lunch and learn sessions, sharing videos from Hustle Crew or leanin.org, whatever it might be, make sure that the data is going around your team to show them all the different ways that bias exists and manifests. The second really powerful thing that you can do is start to educate people on microaggressions. Now, we know that even though we are all moving through the same workplace, we're experiencing it in very different ways. For example, in the corporate world, men and women are often treated differently for the very same behavior or action. And one really powerful way that this shows up is in the likability penalty, also known as the likability bias. Because we expect men, based on outdated traditional gender roles, to show up assertively and confidently, we reward them when they're bossy, when they're direct. We see that as a sign of power and authority. But what happens when a woman acts in the same way? Well, the research shows us that if a woman is direct, to the point, she's often labeled mean, bitchy, or bossy. This is just one of the ways that bias affects the team, the company, and women who often disproportionately face this likability penalty and likability bias will internalize that. It will impact their self-esteem and their self-confidence. In the worst case scenario, it might mean they leave your company and look for a place that supports them better. Now, as a pretty confident, extroverted woman, I can certainly say that I have had my fair share of likability bias and likability penalty. It's something I faced working in startups, and it's even something I faced trying to build a business in a male-dominated industry. It's really important that you create relatable ways for people to engage with the knowledge of things like microaggressions. So whether it's sharing your own personal experiences like I just did, or resorting to examples from the press or the media, it can be a really powerful way to create space for a conversation about bias to happen. The third thing that you can do to discuss bias at work and minimize its impact is push for evidence. The next time you're interviewing someone and somebody says, "Oh, I didn't really like them, I don't think they're going to fit in," push for why. Push for the evidence. What did they say? What did they do that made you feel like they won't fit in? Similarly, if someone makes a negative comment about another teammate, she was really bossy, she was really mean, push for evidence. What did she say that was really bossy? what did she do that was really mean? By pushing for very clear, very specific examples, you have an opportunity to unpack their interpretation and their perspective, and then come to the conclusion as to whether or not there's a learning opportunity there, for the person to improve their behavior, or whether there's a learning opportunity for the person who felt like the behavior was inappropriate to actually reflect on what might be their own bias or prejudice. Now, it's really important to learn that this is an ongoing journey, and there's always so much more that we can do to not only challenge our own biases, but also call them out when we see them. It takes courage, it takes guts, and it takes an inclusive environment that has your back. Good luck.